And hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. This is eLearnChat, where it is all about learning. I'm Rick Zanotti, and I'm joined today by my good friend and co-host, Dr. Susan Nash. Hey, Susan, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
You had a 50-yard dash to get here, didn't you?
I kind of did.
Yeah, I know. I could tell. Um,
My hair's all crazy.
you look fine. You always look fine. Um, and in studio, we've got Harold Muliata. He'll be joining us shortly, and he is our video producer, and he'll also be helping co-host. Um, no guests today. We are your guests. So here we go. This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation. Visit us at www.relatecasts.net. Thanks. And we are back, and we're ready to go. Susan, how have you been?
I've been really, really good. But I've been thinking a lot about providers of all the kind of catalogs of courses
Mm,
and I'm wondering where they are now after like 10 years of consolidation of course offerings.
that's a good question because you've got Udemy, which is a huge provider, and that's all independents for the most part who put their content on Udemy and sell courses. Some people do really well on that, some people not so well, and they have a fairly good catalog of everything. But again, it's not necessarily an organized catalog that they focus on and they build as this is whatever is out there, and they are the largest, I believe, catalog in the world right now of e-learning courses. They're video e-learning, so everything on their site is videos, and it works. It's pretty good. Then you've got there's a lot of other uh, people supported kind of aggregators that just bring a lot of content in. Again, similar to Udemy, but they're a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit different. And then you've got the big ones. And
Well,
yeah,
well, also, you don't hear as much hype about Coursera and EDX as you used to, and they do have the free levels, and then they
oop,
and then the levels where you try to get college credit from it. And I just wonder, what the verdict is now after all these years.
well, it's interesting. What you're saying is those are the educational ones, the college ones,
Hmm.
things like that. And I'm talking about the corporate ones. Two
Right.
different. They're kind of two different worlds
And then
because,
there's Linda,
and then you've got
LinkedIn
Linda, which
Learning.
is now LinkedIn Learning, and
Hmm.
and LinkedIn for the most part kind of is more corporate, but they do span other things like media and other things which work really well. I think they're doing well from what I heard.
I
LinkedIn
think
Learning
so.
has really grown. I mean, Linda, let's see, they acquired lynda.com. I think it was $1.2 billion. Not bad for a little school teacher who started her own um, company out of a very small place and then expanded to two rooms and then eventually grew it to about I think it was about 80 million. She got 1.2 billion from what if I recall correctly. It may have been more, but I think it was 1.2 billion. Way to go, Linda. She worked really hard for that, and she had great people, and they did a good job.
Hmm.
And LinkedIn Learning seems to be keeping it going pretty well. And um, you should go put some of your stuff on LinkedIn Learning because you've got a lot of content and you've done a lot of teaching. You'd be a natural for them.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I'll have to think about that. I guess the thing is what topic, and
They have so
that's.
many, and you're the kind that could
Mhm.
say, "What do you want me to teach you?" and just go off and do it. but but yeah, on the educational side, that's an interesting one because how many colleges are using canned content from other providers? That I don't know. You would have a better handle on that. For example, I'm not familiar with Coursera or what was the other one? EduX?
EDX and
EDX.
EDX used to be MIT Open
Oh,
Courseware.
okay. I've heard of
Yeah, and then
MIT's. Okay.
they evolved and they started So there are kind of two different kinds of approaches for the open courseware that's available on the higher education level.
Hmm.
So on the one hand, um, you have the video heavy, and so you've got and it started out with like the great courses from great universities, and you have the
Yes.
teachers who really weren't very good researchers. They go,
Hmm.
hey, let's make you guys useful, and let's
Yes.
put you in, and you get great teaching evaluations, but you don't really like to write. So what are we going to
Hmm.
do with you? So they started videoing those, and they put them up. It started at MIT, but then Yale did it too, and Stanford, and I think Coursera started a consortium. And so those are kind of MOOCs, and they tend to be video lecture heavy. But then
Right.
you have the other kind, which are text heavy and open textbook heavy.
Hmm.
They're focused on the open textbooks.
And I would think
And so
that
you
isn't as good
get,
today.
well, and the Sailor, like for example, Sailor Academy, and a lot of companies or organizations that get accredited or get accrediting recommendations for transfer credit from places like American Council of Education, they create the material, and many times it's available for free, or
Mm.
you just have to register. And I will say that there are colleges and universities that use that as like, because they don't want as an open textbook. So they use that as the foundation of their course.
Now, you teach in a university. Um,
Mm-hmm.
would you agree that current day students are not necessarily readers?
Um, it depends on what level and what the topic is. I will say that humanities, and if it's something that's interesting to them, they will read it.
Hmm.
Um, but if it's well, but then I will agree that there are a lot of people that just go with videos, and then unfortunately there are a lot of PowerPoints with bullet points,
Right.
which is kind of
Right.
an enemy of reading.
Now it's interesting because for years, every time I go to Barnes and Noble, and I don't go to Barnes and Noble that much anymore, partly because the sections I used to go to are mostly gone. If you want to buy computer
Mhm.
books or anything with tech, you're lucky you have one aisle, and I'm talking one side of one aisle. All those 4, 5, 6 rows of computer book gone, gone. They're not there anymore. Nobody's
Mhm.
writing computer books because one, things change too quickly. By the
Yeah.
time you go through the publishing process, you can't get your book out. It's already outdated by 1 or 2 versions. Things are moving that quickly. Not a good thing either, because fast development in software gives you what you get with Adobe and others, where there's a lot of bugs. And everybody's going through
Mhm.
the same thing. There's just bugs everywhere. They're rushing things out. They're not practicing good rigor and engineering techniques. Everything's time driven.
Well,
And yeah, go ahead,
and I
Howard.
think another thing, this is related to what you're saying, is that rather than having these huge versions, like for example, if you wanted to have a book on, say, Adobe Photoshop Creative Suite 5, you could do that before. Nowadays, it's you have Adobe Photoshop CC 2021, and there are huge changes between versions within that same year.
Hmm.
So you could write a book called Adobe Photoshop CC 2021, but it's not even going to cover stuff that might be there in the next month or something.
Right. And by the time it comes out, they're 2022. Your book just went out of date. And that's one of the problems. I know people who wrote books on InDesign and everything. And by the time they came out, they were 2 versions behind. They kind of gave up on the idea. And you don't find too many books on InDesign or other. This is typical of not just Adobe, but all software developers.
Yeah, and
Well,
it's a lot
I
of work to.
guess I
Yeah.
guess, but I will take issue with that. Okay, go to PACT Publishing,
Hmm. Yep. Yeah. Yep.
PACTPUB.com.
Hmm.
See.
And
But
so
they
this
run
is
into
where
the same.
you have amazing production. Most of it's open source software, and so you have a lot of like Python
Right.
cookbooks and Ruby on Rails,
Hmm.
etc. And they do quite well, but notice very little is actually they print on demand, but most of it's ebook.
Right.
And also, when you go to they'll have they'll give you links to like GitHub or whatever the places are where they keep um, where people are sharing the code, so that people can get up to date code. But they have so I don't know, a lot of people use Slack to communicate when they're sharing code. That's a whole that's a whole different
Right.
animal of training.
Yeah, and it's difficult to find one thing that works for everybody. Obviously, everybody in the old days when you went to college, everybody had to learn the same exact way. You read it. You had a lot to read. You had 4 books in a week to read, and they weren't exactly fun books more often than not. And that was your life. You had to do it. Now you've got a lot more choices, and the teachers. You still get a lot of books published by professors, which they like to publish and push their own product, and that's okay. But it's not as easy to get everybody to read 4 or 5 books a week anymore. There's so many distracting and pulling influences. But it is interesting how, just my observations at a Barnes and Noble. You go to Barnes and Noble, and you see really young kids, 10 and under, and then you jump up to about 40s and over. Not much in between. It's interesting, unless you get some parents of the under 10s, and they're not really looking at books. They're just looking at the kids, following them. It's interesting. There are, I would say, several generations that apparently don't read as much.
That said, though, teenagers are obsessed with angsty, anguish-driven, inducing teen books. And there are all sorts of YouTube channels on reviewing different teen books.
Yeah. Well, my gosh, you look at a lot of 30-years old, and all they read are vampire novels. You just go,
it's right.
What's with the vampire novels? They love vampire novels, every one of them. Look at the movies that were made on the vampires and stuff. They've done very, very well. So Buffy, where's Buffy nowadays? But, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that was very popular. So, each generation has what they like or don't like. When I was growing up, my generation was pretty much a lot of science fiction. Tons of science fiction. Then you had sword and sorcery. Those were really big. Then it started changing. Not so much that. Then you get different kinds. So everybody's got different main books to read. But it's I guess you can't. It's always been everybody has different interests. I remember if you go now to, let's say, a Barnes and Noble, you don't find as many books on self-awareness, self-development like you found in the, let's say, 60s and 70s. There's different motivations, different interests, different paths. I just find that interesting how the generations and the needs or curiosities change quite dramatically sometimes.
Well, the other thing that this makes me wonder is when it comes to, I'm not sure so much if it's a question of whether people are reading or not, but what they are reading and where and why do they read certain things. For example, I'm thinking, I don't know if people are going into books, like I don't know that many people that go into bookstores to buy books. People do order books online and they do get ebooks. The other thing, though, is I almost feel like perhaps in people's consciousness, something that's just written that they read may have been devalued in their mind, so that people are looking for things that are free they can read. Like maybe they're just searching for things on the internet they read, perhaps articles, perhaps stories that they can just find on the internet. And I wonder how much of what people read nowadays is things they can get for free as opposed to actual books and things that they buy. Because I assume a larger proportion of what people read now is just free stuff they find because there's more of it available now. But
a lot of it's inexpensive in ebooks. People do read a lot of ebooks, but you know what they really read? And I have a great business idea, and I hope nobody steals it, but they should, because I can't do it myself. And that is, okay, two prongs to this. First of all, true crime. People love true crime, especially as it's unfolding, but then they want to go back and revisit like serial killers and all that. So I think that like my big breakthrough thing, I think graphic novels have come into. I mean, they've been around and they
Hmm.
are solid. I mean, anime, and then with like the Crow and Mouse and all those early ones now into whatever. If you do a true series of true crime graphic novels, I don't know how graphic you could actually make them, but they would. I think they would really sell, and I think that you could use them in conjunction with psychology and sociology classes, and people would swarm to some kind of psychology or sociology classes that have to do with different types of like serial killers or the name Gabby Petito, like the abusive relationships where people see it unfolding, and then the person that seems to be the victimizer is actually the victim.
Mm. So we're talking about people being more pathological today
Oh, right.
in their interests and needs. Yeah, think about it. Why is crime so interesting to people, especially serial killers? That's a
Yeah,
scary kind of sub. That's a
it's
sub
horrifying.
genus of psychopathological issues all over the place. And they say, that he was such a nice guy. And there are some women who've also been serial killers. She was such a nice girl. Just don't get
And they
near
get,
her.
and they get proposals on death row. People want to marry them.
I know. Well,
Yeah.
that's another. Here we go again. Are we that psychopathic? Maybe.
I think
Maybe.
we always have been. I think there's
Yeah.
always been a fascination with
Death
criminals
and
and
death.
people who, killers and criminals and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's
Well,
it.
true. I mean, like fairy tales.
Oh yeah,
Well, yeah.
even fairy tales. Yeah,
Well, actually, yeah. If you look at any children's books, children's novels, and they're pretty darn violent if you think about it. They're a little odd, and yet, well, they mostly come down from somewhere in the Middle Ages, or whatever. Let's have some Inquisition novels. That's good. But it does make you
Right.
wonder. It's an interesting facet of our society, or our not even our society. It's across the world of how we have a tendency to either enjoy or focus on violence. You wonder. Did you ever see the Twilight Zone? Now, this is Twilight Zone, the second generation. This is back, I think, in the 80s, where they came out with a new set of Twilight Zone episodes. It was a 1 hour show every week. Rod Serling was still around, and they would have maybe three vignettes. They were shorter stories. And there was one where all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this humongous spaceship flies over and lands. Well, it doesn't land, just hovers over New York, the United Nations. And the alien comes down and they're all looking at him and he says, "You have failed us. You have 24 hours to make things right or you will be destroyed." And they're all like, "Oh my God, what do we do?" Yeah. So, and the alien disappears back up to his ship. And so the next scene, everybody's signing documents everywhere. There's peace. I mean, they're trying to get peace accords everywhere, the whole world. And then it comes back the next day, 24 hours later. And the alien says, "What have you come up with?" And they go, "Here, Mr. Alien, we've done it for the first time in history. We have peace on Earth." And he's looking at the stuff and he goes, "You fools, peace on Earth. I don't want peace." And he goes, "We're looking for warriors for our games and everything." And he leaves, and the next scene you see Earth exploding.
Oh my goodness.
That was a classic Twilight Zone. That was one of the best. He wasn't looking. They wanted warriors. And that wasn't what they wanted. Isn't it funny? The interpretation of what will make us better? Peace. What are they looking for? War. Just makes you
Usually
wonder.
they're just looking to fatten them up because
That's
they're
true. That's
hungry.
right. Well, there was some good Twilight Zones on that. Or Outer Limits, I think, had one on that, where the aliens come down and they're being treated wonderfully, and some people are saying, "No, I don't know if I believe this. It can't be. It's too good to be true." And then they find out that They're going into the ships as food. They're being harvested. Yeah, it was pretty good. So, yeah, I mean, that's just one example. There's a lot of fascination with that kind of stuff. Um, and it is sort of interesting that what can tweak a person, what creates a Jeffrey Dahmer. My gosh, what kind of depraved, and you hear him in an interview, he's like, well, I kind of had this need, and I knew it was wrong, but I had a need. Yeah, I guess he did. That's in Some Needs Can Kill, and most of them just for whatever reason go berserk nuts, and they seem very normal to the outside world, but they're not. It's interesting.
Right.
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up as an example of that is really interesting to people today. I don't personally find it interesting. I've looked at some specials on serial killers, and I just kind of marvel at, wow, And I'm glad we're not in Minority Report, the movie, because then they'd all be captured, but so would everybody else. They'd capture anybody and everybody for whatever thought they could ever have. That's a scary one too. But can you imagine if Minority Report were real, which you never know, it could be. I think he had a thought of creating a crime. Let's get him before he does.
Right.
Wow. That'd be pretty good. Imagine if you have a little kid and they steal from the cookie jar and the criminal police come out. We knew you were doing that, kid. Come with us. That'd be interesting.
You were going to steal something larger in 20 years. We're going to put a stop to it.
That's right. Right now, you'll never make it to 20. So well, getting back to the subject at hand, the interesting point,
that sounds like a creativity building course, and I really think that we need more creativity building courses. And I think you see them, and they're at different places, and I haven't found too many that are very interesting.
Now, what happened in the old days? I remember I knew a lot of people who were English students or majors, and they always had some sort of creative writing course. Are they not doing that anymore, or?
Oh, they are.
They are.
Yeah.
Are they good, the courses, or is it just sort of like an introduction to creative writing?
Well, it depends on. Sometimes it's creative writing with focus on commercial writing. So you learn basically how to write different genres like science fiction, etc.
Okay.
And those are usually in journalism departments.
Mm-hmm.
And then English, there was a big push, and they were like, this is when I was working on my master's. My master's degree is an emphasis in creative writing. So I did a creative thesis, and they said, well, a lot of people went and got an MFA, sort of like University of Iowa, etc. I didn't. I just had the Master's of Arts, which is like a regular, just with the track. And so basically in those courses, you learn to write completely uncommercial stuff that, hopefully if you do well, you'll be a professor, a visiting professor in an English department. Well, needless to say that the number of people getting MFAs far exceeded the job market. I did it because I just wanted it.
Yeah.
But
well, you have an interesting trajectory
it just
because
depends.
and you're a little different too, because you started out with geology, then economics,
yes,
and then the master in arts. But that's a unique curriculum, because there aren't that many that go through the sciences, then the business part of it, and then go into the arts degree.
And then in my thesis, I called it active fault, and basically I used geological ideas to inform all my poems.
Active fault sounds like one of those mystery novels. Active fault.
Yeah, like we're getting back to true crime, right?
True Crime by Dr. Susan Nash. Yep.
I wish we would do more creative writing courses. I mean, I wish we had more creativity courses. I wish, and I think that what happens is a lot of times people learn to write. So basically, in the typical creative writing course, you'll do a lot of memoirs and personal narratives, and people love it because they're really thinking about trying to make sense of their lives, and then also thinking about maybe keeping it for future reference. And then poetry, I mean, you really have to read a lot of poetry, especially widely in the 20th century to be able to produce anything that's more, better than doggerel. So I always cringe when it comes to the poetry side stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I know a couple poets, and they tend to write stuff about themselves, but then these people need a little bit of therapy. So I could see why. They were sort of interesting. But yeah, it is interesting, though, because the creative writing can be so useful in e-learning, and yet it is so often not really employed. Like, for example, we've had on the show many times some of the folks from Artisan e-learning, and they're very creative. I watched what the kind of work that they write, and they're really creative in their approaches. And I love watching the stuff they do because they take that extra time to just not teach something, but make it understandable and also useful and fun at the same time. And that's really good kind of learning. And I love plugging them because I think they do great work. And that's kind of an interesting thing in the work we've done. We try to get creative. Depends. It depends on your clients. Some clients go creativity. No. We don't do that. Other ones want to have fun. I can tell you, in the years we've been in business, which is quite a few, we've only had one that wanted humor in a course and something more creative. Others wanted a little bit pushing that boundary, but not much. So it just depends. And I think part of the problem with anything right now, and you've probably seen this, is everyone is afraid of lawsuits. Is everyone is offendable. At all moments, everyone is offendable by something.
But you know what? I've been dealing with that since, basically when I was in grad school, which is, late 80s, because that's where we were starting to have changes in legislation. And I think some of it was good in protecting people. But then, for example, one of the things that I love doing in my courses, I like having people do projects and then having to do PowerPoints. And I think that that's a lot of the case in a lot of the practical courses. You were talking about using creativity.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, one of the assignments is to design a food truck. If you had to develop a food truck, and then how could you use it for helping different cultures understand each other? And so there's a lot of creativity. And I haven't seen anybody do anything that would be offensive. But it just depends on your prompt. You can easily set up the wrong kind of prompt that will end up, taking people down a road that's not very good.
Right. Right. Well, believe it or not, we are out of time. It goes fast. It goes really fast. Susan, we'll see you next week.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it depends. I'm going to be at a conference, and I'm traveling back on Thursday, so I may be on a plane at the time.
Oh, let us know what time, and then maybe we can arrange some time. Because we have a show next week. We have a show next week at 4 p.m., so if you could do anything like a 3, that'd be good. If not, I guess we'll leave it for the following week.
Okay.
That sounds good. Are you going to a show in Houston?
It's in Denver, so I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah.
Should be good. Are you actually going live to a show? It's so much fun, isn't it?
It's going to be really fun. It's 2 different societies, geophysicists and geologists coming together. And so it's a hybrid. We're doing some live and some streamed in. So, but I'm really looking forward to the live part, face to face.
Until you get the quantum physicists, you don't know what fun is.
Geophysicists. So they one of the interesting things. Yeah, seismicity, but then ground penetrating radar is one of the ones I really want to check out what they're doing.
That's actually interesting. They go pretty far now, and they go pretty far now, don't they?
I think so, but yeah, I want to find some treasure.
Yeah. What'd you think of the earthquake in Melbourne yesterday? Almost a 6.0. Oh. That's the first big one they've had, I think, forever.
I'll have to check that out. I didn't even read about that.
Yeah, I had a friend who lives there. I have a friend who lives there, and he said it was 30 seconds long, and he was holding on to his TV for dear life so it wouldn't fall over. That he said, we've had tremors like a truck going by, but that's it, never anything bigger. So, and he's been there most of his life. So decades and decades, nothing. So that's kind of an odd earthquake, just for them. And it's pretty flat in Melbourne. So interesting. Well, anyway, we are at the end of time. If you're watching the show, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Please subscribe and give us any feedback. And also, if you want to get a hold of Susan, we'll find her LinkedIn information below. And same with me. You can get a hold of us through LinkedIn or other methods. Anyway, we will see you folks next week. Have a great one. Susan, as always, appreciate it. Harold, we'll see you a little bit later. We have another show coming up in about a half hour called Sounding Great. Here we go. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
And it's a